Hello everyone, Earl Henderson, Primordial Defense. Thank you for watching. I have another Monday quarterback video for you. I'm going to play this video and talk about things that are going on, to better explain what's going on, and talk about things that I think that are being done right and or done wrong. This incident occurred on June 7th, 2023 in Denver, Colorado. These are two totally separate incidents involving police officers being shot on the same day. That's a bit of an oddity. I, right now, trying to think about it, cannot recall where officers from the same department were shot on the same day in two totally unrelated incidents. So just odd, to say the least. So I'll play the video for the first incident, and I'll play some of the news conference they had for that incident. I'll wrap that up, and then I will go into the second shooting that occurred. All right, here we go.
Shots fired, I'm hit. Shots fired, I'm hit.
Where you at? 1389, where you at?
2601 Zunai. I'm hit. Suspect, I think, is down.
2601 Zunai, shots fired. Officer down, switch to channel 1.
I see, sir. Next one, was he saying you?
Yeah, we're trying to confirm.
Good officer down. I heard shots.
Cars covering 2601 Zunai.
Got me an ambulance. I'm still on my feet. I still got eyes on the suspect. Briggs, where are you? 2601 Zunai in the front. In the front by the main entrance. There's a suspect. He's to the north. He's down. I don't see him moving towards the highway. Briggs, where are you? Where's the front? Towards the front of the hotel? First car coming in. 731-6. 731-6.
Clear.
suspect's down. Start an ambulance. We're good. Get the ambulance in.
The ambulance is headed in code 10.
Update on 2 officer-involved shootings. I'm going to turn it over to Matt Clark here in a minute to provide those overviews. But before I do that, I want to first acknowledge that one person did lose their life and another person was seriously injured in these 2 incidents. And also these 2 incidents, I think, illustrate the challenge that we face here in Denver with far too many guns in our community, individuals that are inclined to use them. And I think it also highlights the importance of our officers wearing their safety equipment while they're out serving their community. So I understand that you all have had an opportunity to view the video, and we'll certainly take questions at the end. So, Matt.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I'm Commander Matt Clark with the Denver Police Department's Major Crimes Division. I appreciate you being here and giving us an opportunity to provide an update on the 2 officer-involved shooting incidents that occurred on Wednesday, June 7th, 2023. Just for order, I'll run through the first incident in its entirety, show some still photos, answer any questions, and then we can transition into the other incident as well, and Chief Thomas will be available. This is intended to be a follow-up briefing based upon information that we've gathered after interviewing witnesses, allowing the officers time to heal and recover so they can provide an interview to the investigators, as well as analyzing evidence that was collected at the scene. There may be information I don't have at this point. There also may be information I cannot disclose based on the filing on a juvenile offender, which may limit some of the information I'm able to offer. But to the degree we're able, we'll answer any questions at the end. On Wednesday, June 7th, 2023, at about 4:12 in the morning, a uniformed Denver police officer was conducting directed patrol at the Quality Inn located at 2601 Zunai Street. The officer was seated in the driver's seat of his marked police vehicle directly in front of the front entrance of the hotel. The officer had been at the location for several minutes when a male exited the front doors of the hotel and walked directly towards the officer's vehicle. Suddenly, without warning or prior interaction, the male produced a firearm from his jacket and began firing directly at the officer through the passenger side of the vehicle, striking the officer multiple times. The officer immediately exited his vehicle and moved to the back of the patrol car. The male went around the front of the officer's vehicle and continued firing upon the officer. While attempting to use his police vehicle as cover, the officer returned fire, striking the male multiple times. The injured officer called for additional assistance from other officers as well as ambulances to respond to the location. Responding officers took the male into custody. He was promptly assessed by a paramedic crew and transported to Denver Health Medical Center, where he was later pronounced deceased. Additional officers attended to the injured officer and promptly loaded him into a police vehicle and transported him to the hospital for assistance. He has since been released from the hospital. Through the investigation, we've determined that the suspect drove to the location and parked on the west side of the building at 4:02 a.m. He remained near his vehicle for several minutes before walking around the building. He went in front of the officer's vehicle and directly into the hotel. At that point, there was no interaction between the officer and the individual. While inside the hotel, the male inquired about renting a room from the clerk before determining the cost was too high for him. He walked out of the hotel through the same main doors where the officer was previously parked and approached the officer's vehicle, discharging his firearm multiple times. After talking with numerous witnesses and people who knew the suspect, we have not been able to determine what led to him ambushing the officer. Investigators determined the suspect fired 18 rounds from a Glock 26 9mm handgun. The suspect had an additional magazine, which was holding 16 rounds. The suspect was also found to be in possession of a loaded .38 caliber revolver, which was not fired during the incident. Firearm traces are being completed to determine whether the suspect was the owner of those firearms. The involved officer discharged 17 rounds from his duty handgun towards the suspect. The offender in this case has been identified as 35-year-old Nicholas Lendrum, Lendrum. His date of birth is 12/3 of 1987. I feel extremely fortunate that the injured Denver police officer was wearing a ballistic vest. The officer was struck by 3 of the rounds that were fired by the individual. All 3 impacted the officer's ballistic bulletproof vest. While the rounds were stopped by the officer's vest, he experienced significant bruising and pain at the impact sites from the rounds that were fired. He has since been released from the hospital and continues to recover. The injured officer who discharged his weapon is a corporal assigned to District 6. A corporal in the Denver Police Department is a field training officer who is responsible for training recruit officers and also serves as a line level supervisor. That officer has been with the department since 2013 and has not been involved in a previous police shooting incident. The officer's body-worn camera was not activated during the event, but was activated by the officer after the shooting incident. The directed patrol action that the officer was taking at the hotel when he was ambushed was not an action that required activation of the body-worn camera under our policy. The officer did, however, have the presence of mind to activate the camera after the shooting incident and as he was waiting for additional officers to respond. The involved officer will complete the department's reintegration program before returning to his patrol assignment. The investigation of this incident and the next incident that I'll speak to is being investigated by the Colorado Bureau of Investigations, the Colorado State Patrol, the Denver Police Department's Homicide Unit, and the Denver District Attorney's Office. It's also overseen by the Office of the Independent Monitor, which is a civilian oversight entity. Before we take questions, I'll briefly show some still shots. Again, the chief described that we've already released the video for those who haven't seen the video or choose not to watch it. We do want to give a perspective and have some images that were captured. There was surveillance video that we obtained from the hotel from the canopy directly in front of the front doors. This particular image shows the officer seated in the driver's seat of his patrol vehicle. The offender had just exited the door. The door is still closing to the hotel. He has retrieved his firearm, and that is a muzzle flash from the firearm that's directed directly at the officer. This is a photograph of the Glock 26 9mm handgun that the offender used to shoot the officer with. This image is the revolver that he had, again not fired during the incident. I'd like to provide a photograph of the officer's vest. There's two specific defects noted in the vest that were impacted by bullets. It's this middle one in the vest here, and then the one in the upper right. This defect here is just a tear, and it was not associated with this incident. But this would have been the back panel of the officer's vest. Any questions about this incident before we move on?
The suspect, has there anything been turned up in his background and his history? Do lead you guys to believe that he acted this way?
Again, we've talked to roommates, people who knew him, and nobody's been able to give us a reason, a cause for him ambushing the officer that day.
Was he from Denver?
He was not. He did not live in Denver.
As far as you determine, does he have any kind of criminal background?
I'm not clear on specifically his criminal background, and typically we don't speak to those during these sessions.
So you say Denver is from Colorado?
He does have residence in Colorado.
Can you say which town?
I'm not positive. I don't want to.
So the wounds were to the officer's back?
He sustained 2 injuries to his back and 1 to his front, lower abdomen area.
So was that probably the initial and then maybe rolling to get out of the vehicle?
That's what we suspect, that the initial one impacted the officer on the front, and then as he rolled and moved to get out of the vehicle, that he exposed his back, and that's what would have been struck by the offender's gunfire.
And Commander Clark, you're saying all the bullets hit that vest, is that correct?
That's correct.
And they were all fired while he was in the car?
We believe so. Now there are rounds. There's gunfire that you'll see from the video as the officer is exiting the vehicle and trying to move to the back. But the best of the officer recalls that those impacts were while he was in the car and exiting the vehicle.
When he called for backup, how many officers responded?
I'm not sure.
And do you know what the response time was?
Immediate. That's an immediate call for help.
Right. Were there any officers nearby?
There were officers nearby the area. They were there very quickly.
Did the officer say if the suspect said any words at all?
When we spoke with the officer there, he described having no interaction, no verbal exchange with the individual at any point.
Why was there a directed patrol at the Quality Inn? I think that's what you call it, a directed patrol?
Yeah, the officers were doing specific patrol there. It's somewhat of a routine patrol for the safety of the residents there, for the community. It's just that time, 4:10, that time in the morning is typically a lower call load, and the officers are providing specific patrol in different areas.
Are they asked to go sit somewhere where there might be potential problems, or why is a directed patrol asked for in the first place?
So I think it's fair to acknowledge that that particular location is being used as a temporary emergency shelter for migrants, but it is also an active hotel. And so in working with other city entities, we are providing extra patrol at that location.
And Chief, are there also directed patrols at other temporary shelters in the city? I've seen police cars at different shelters around town side.
Certainly.
That kind of what's going on?
Certainly.
Was there any elevated criminal activity in that area in addition?
No.
Okay.
No, I think it's just a precaution that we're taking for the safety of the migrants as well as the safety of the community. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chief. The next incident occurred the same day, excuse me, about 7:28 p.m.
All right, so this officer is sitting outside this hotel because it is a part of his assignment. It is during a time frame in which they have kind of a low call volume, and it is a time for them to kind of hang out this place as an extra patrol. Could they do it at other times on shift? Yeah, most likely. Sometimes what happens with agencies is you'll have a list of extra patrols. This is where people in the community call and say, hey, I'd like an officer to, drive by here a little bit more, or come check this out a little bit more. So places like stores that have had break-ins, neighborhoods that have had break-ins, vandalism, stuff like that. Or, there could be someone having issues with domestic or something, or receiving threatening stuff, and they just want an extra patrol at their house, their street, whatever. So the agencies will take these requests, and the dispatchers will log them into the CAD system. And generally, at the beginning of a shift, that shift will have a shift meeting. So all the people working patrol will be there. Shift sergeant, maybe the communications shift supervisor will be there if their shifts align and are kind of on the same hours. If not, then at least someone from dispatch could possibly be there. And it really depends on the agency too. If they're so large and the dispatch center is just somewhere else, they may not have a person from dispatch sitting in there. Smaller agencies that have their own dispatchers, it is likely to see a dispatcher sitting in there, and they'll talk about what happened the day before, catch people up if they're coming back in from their regular days off, talk about what happened on the shift prior while they were off duty, etc. And then they'll go through that extra patrol list, and it may be that whoever works this one assigned area, whether they call it a beat, a division, a sector, a zone, whatever, they'll say, all right, these are all the extra patrols for this area. You all who work beat 30, you all take care of this. Or they may assign individually, all right, Bob, you're doing these two, Sarah, you're doing these two, etc. It really depends on agency to agency how they do that. And those officers, at some point during their shift, will go perform an extra patrol. So there's no set time on when it could be done. And the duration of it, there's no set time frame of how long they're supposed to do it. Some places, they'll just drive by, call in to dispatch, say extra patrol, number one in the, beat 30, or they'll call up, maybe they'll say the address potentially. Sometimes they won't say the address. It'll be on a list, and for example, beat 30, there could be 5 extra patrols, right? And they'll have them numbered 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Number 1 is at 123 ABC Street. Number 2 is 154 XYZ Street, whatever. And they could go on the radio and say, Extra Patrol beat 30, number 1. Or number 1 beat 30, however they want to word it. And they'll know, all right, so they'll log that time. And then they'll say, Extra Patrol complete or something to that effect. And then they'll log that time. So it gets logged in the system that they went and performed this extra patrol. They could be there for a few seconds. They could be there for a few minutes. There's no set standard or rule generally on it. Sometimes these things occur quickly. It's kind of a check the box kind of thing. All right, I went and did this extra patrol. Now I'm going to go out and play and do my thing. Sometimes it's used as I don't feel like going on a call right now. I'll go on this extra patrol and I'll get out on foot and go check some doors. Spend the next 20 minutes or so on an extra patrol, and different calls are coming in, and they're busy on this call and not being sent to other things. So it all varies. Sometimes something like this, what I suspect is probably happening is this officer is likely using this time to maybe catch up on some reports that he has to do, or he could be doing something like listening to a podcast. But a lot of times time frames like this are used for catching up on paperwork. So it looks like he might be messing with his computer right here. It's hard to say from this point of view on this security camera, but I think he's probably on his computer. Being turned like that and the way his arms are, it just looks like to me he is on his MDT. This is one problem of being parked somewhere, is where are you at and what is behind you and what is to the side of you. This is often why you will see cop cars in a big ass parking lot at night and the back of their car is backed up to something that no one can get around to them. They may be parked up in the middle of a wall where the back of their vehicle is up against that wall, and they can see everything to their left, right, and front, and there's a lot of distance between their car and some other objects. If not that, then you may see them parked in a way to where they are the furthest point away from an entrance, with the nose of the car pointed at the entrance so they can see who's coming in. This type of tactical positioning is common with a lot of officers because they are thinking about that safety aspect. Who can walk up on this car while I'm not fully aware of my surroundings? If you're nose down into the computer, typing up a report, if you're, I don't know if there's many places still doing written reports, but if you're sitting there with a clipboard writing a report or filling out the rest of the paperwork, whatever, it can be hard to maintain that situational awareness. And so sometimes I think some officers will park kind of tactically, but then they will just completely nosedive down into whatever it is they're doing and then not look around periodically to make sure that there's no one coming around. I have snuck up on a lot of people sitting in their cars. It's obviously a lot more difficult to do it from the front. You're a lot more visible. But even in parking lots with lights on, you approach at a certain angle, stay in the blind zone of the mirrors. I have gotten super close to people before to where I am just mere feet away from their side windows, hearing the exact conversation that they're talking about, word for word. Even for my old deaf ass, I can understand what they're saying, word for word. depending on angles and everything, I can even see into the vehicle somewhat. And they have no idea that I am there. I've done this. I cannot count the times that I've done this. So, and these were people who, there was more than one. Sometimes it was just one person, but there's multiple people. So there's multiple people in the vehicle, and none of them knew my presence. And I'm a big guy. I am freaking 6'8". I am like freaking Sasquatch. All right? I am not a small little ninja, okay? I am freaking big. And my big Sasquatch ass can sneak up on people in a parking lot with lights. So your situational awareness has to be on point. Even if you park tactically, you still have to be looking up and scanning. Looking left, looking forward, looking right, checking the mirrors as you're going from left to right. Otherwise, it can be easy for someone to sneak up on you. Now, I don't know what's to the rear of him. It looks like a pull-in or something like that. So does he have the best positioning here? Not exactly. I don't like the positioning here one bit. I don't think it's good. Where else does he have the park at? I don't know. I don't know the layout of this building. I don't know what the parking lot looks like. Anything like that. But I will say I just don't like how he's parked there. I would say that since he's not really hiding, really, he's out in the open, I wouldn't think it would be a bad idea to keep that vehicle in drive and just have your foot on the brake. I mean, if the vehicle's going to be running, you know, you got the computer running, AC running, whatever, keep the vehicle in gear. Keep it in drive and just keep your foot on the brake. That way, if you have to, you can very quickly and easily smash that accelerator and get off the X. This guy is lucky. Super lucky that the bad guy was just a complete shit show with his marksmanship. This officer very easily could have been murdered sitting in his car. Now, to his credit, he bails out quickly. And I think that he does have some degree of situational awareness. And if not some degree of situational awareness, he is quick to react. So let's watch this here. So it looks like his head starts to turn there. So pay attention to his head. It's hard to tell in this grainy footage. Back it up. So this guy's coming out the door. Watch right here. You can kind of keep this in your peripheral, but watch his head. Looks like he possibly turns to look, and this guy starts to bring the gun out. And it looks like before he even shoots, he starts to move. Now, it could be that due to the frame rate that this camera's operating off of, he's already fired the shot, but the frame rate did not pick up the muzzle flash. So before we even see a muzzle flash, he could have already fired a round. Some cameras just are like that with the frame rate on them. So I do believe that this officer had some situational awareness of what was going on. I think he saw this movement and he looked to see what was going on. I think that helped buy him some time. He quickly reacts, bails out of the vehicle, and as he's bailing out of this vehicle, it looks like he's getting his gun out. But he bails out and he gets in the fight. So I don't know anything about this officer other than what they've mentioned in here. He's a field training officer. When he's not being a field training officer, he takes on some kind of supervisory kind of responsibilities if needed. I don't know what, other experience he may have, if he's taken any classes outside of what the police have given him. He may have gone to some commercial firearms training school and got extra training on his own. He may be the type of person who practices on his own. So he may have received training at some, obviously at some point as an officer, at the academy and then in-service training. And then he may also be the type to possibly go to the range and practice stuff on his own. I don't know. But I'd say that's probably more plausible based off how he reacted to this basic ambush. He reacted to contact very quickly. He stayed in the fight. He engaged in the fight. And won this fight.
Shots fired. I'm hit. Shots fired. I'm hit.
Where you at? 1389, where you at?
2601 Zunai. I'm hit. Suspect, I think, is down.
2601 Zunai, shots fired. Officer down. Push to channel 1.
Okay.
All right, so that's the only time we hear radio communications. He takes contact, he bails out, he gets in the fight, bang, 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 bang. He's fighting, continuing to fight, keeping both hands on the gun, keeping a good, solid, two-handed grip on this handgun.
Shots fired.
And then he decides to talk on the radio. So I've talked before in other videos where I think some officers are just too quick to be jumping on that radio, and because they're so quick to want to jump on that radio, they are taking one of their hands off their gun, their handgun. When realistically, I think they need to be keeping both hands on that gun, trying to stabilize that handgun as much as possible to make it as accurate as possible. Because right out the gate, a handgun sucks. Right out the gate, right out the box, a handgun sucks. It sucks for accuracy, and it sucks for terminal ballistics in comparison to long guns. Yes, handguns can still incapacitate threats. Yes, handguns can hit targets at 200 yards. I have often shot targets at 200 yards with a Glock 17 with iron sights only. XS big dot sights, to be exact. Not exactly known as a target sight. Those are combat sights. Big fat dot on there. I can hit a steel gong at 200 yards. But that's under cool, calm conditions on the range. And I'm using a good two-handed grip and good trigger control. But under conditions like this, fighting for your life, having already been shot, that's different. You're not making 200-yard shots in conditions like this. So it is critical that you keep both hands on that gun to keep it as accurate as you can. Otherwise, when you take that one hand off, you are almost pretty much cutting your accuracy in half. The tiniest amount of movement in that handgun will throw shot placement way off. Merely pulling the trigger causes the gun to move, and that can cause your shot placement to be off by several inches. Or as you add increments of distance, it could be off by a couple feet, and you could completely miss the target. So I really like how he stays in the fight, keeps both hands on the gun, delivers rounds to target, and then what I'm thinking, because we can't see what he sees, what I'm thinking is he sees the guy potentially go down, he's not moving anymore, now's the time to start talking.
I'm hit. Shots fired. I'm hit.
Where you at? 1389, where you at?
He fights some more.
2601 Zoo 9. I'm hit. Suspect, I think, is down.
2601 Zoo 9, shots fired. Officer down. Switch to channel 1.
I see, sir. Which one was he saying?
Yeah, we're trying to confirm.
An officer down. I heard shots.
Cars cover in 2601 Zoo 9.
Got me an ambulance. I'm still on my feet. I still got eyes on the suspect. Briggs, where are you? 2601 Zoo 9 in the front. In the front by the main entrance. There's a suspect. He's to the north. He's down. I don't see him moving towards the highway. Briggs, where are you? Where's the front? Towards the front of the hotel? First car coming in. 731-6. 731-6.
Clear.
So it looks like when he gets to his car, he falls down.
731-6. 731-6.
Clear.
We can see what looks like other people getting there. It looked like you can see some flashing lights
Down. Start an ambulance. We're good.
off
Good
the
ambulance.
Ambulance is headed in code 10.
exterior of the building here. And you can see what looks like other people coming up right there. So,
Briggs, where are you? Where's the front?
the only thing that I would say negative about this is I do not recall seeing anything that looked like him doing a magazine change during this. I think that would have been the next appropriate thing to do after communicating. And he fired a bunch of rounds, too.
Where you at? Where you at?
Shots fired. I'm hit. Shots fired. I'm hit.
Where you at? 1389, where you at?
2601 Zoo 9. I'm hit. Suspect, I think, is down.
2601 Zoo 9, shots fired. Officer down. Switch to channel 1.
So it looked like he had looked at his gun at one point. Maybe he thought about doing a reload, and maybe I guess he saw the slide was still forward, and he's still got bullets in it. I don't know. But it was always good to do a reload on your terms when you want to do them. It sucks to be forced into doing a reload, like when you fired the slide lock and you're still taking rounds. That is a crappy time to be doing a reload. He was obviously in a position to where it was safe enough for him to do it. He was taking hand off the gun, talking on the radio, describing that he's down, he's not moving. That would have been an appropriate time for him to go ahead and conduct a reload. When people have been involved in shootings, they sometimes cannot recall with accuracy how many rounds they actually fired. Some give a number that is too low with what they fired. Some give a number that is too high with what they fired. Some get pretty close. Some are accurate. But overall, not a whole lot of people are accurate with being able to recall how many rounds they fired exactly. So, because you cannot rely on your brain under fight or flight to be able to count accurately, because that is something that the forebrain is really good at, not what the midbrain is really good at. And in a fight, your midbrain starts to take over. So the best thing to do is to train for doing a reload. Follow the FAST protocol. Fight, assess, scan, top off, talk, treat injuries, take cover. He fought the guy. He assessed him. His assessment showed that he recognized his bullets had the desired effect. He didn't need to shoot him anymore. Don't really see a full scan. He doesn't appear to fully look around what's going on around him. That's one thing he could have done and should have done, was to look around, see if there's any other bad guys. But after that, should have topped off his gun. That way, if that dude got back up and tried to start fighting again, he would have been able to respond to that threat with a full, fresh magazine versus a partially or near depleted magazine. He fired a lot of rounds. I think he probably realistically only had a couple rounds left in that gun. So if that fight would have started off again, he would have got maybe 2 to 3 rounds out of that gun and then been forced into a emergency reload. So anytime you can do a magazine change, do it. That way, if you have to start fighting some more, you're doing it with a full, fresh magazine instead of a partially depleted or near depleted magazine. So they said that this dude was not even a resident of this town. He was a resident of somewhere else, and talking to his roommates and family and friends, they can't come up with a reason of why this guy did this. It's perplexing. It's really interesting, like what motivated this guy to do that. Was he on drugs? Was he just a huge anti-police kind of person? I don't know. It's anyone's guess. I wish they would have provided more information on the guy. During the briefing, he said that they typically don't go into a person's criminal history during these briefings. I think that's wrong. I think that it is very important for the public to understand what a person's criminal history is. It does have a bearing on the incident. It does have a bearing on the investigation. During investigations of officer-involved shootings, the investigations often will go into what that officer's background is like, what their training is like, what their education is like, what their disciplinary is like. All that information comes into play. It all gets brought up. It's a part of the investigation file. They, of course, will also look up those people, the suspects, and look up their stuff. So the public has an interest in knowing. They have a justified interest in wanting to know information like this. And I think that if they would have gone into explaining this person's background, we probably would have seen some type of criminal history in this person's background. If they would have talked a little bit more about him and revealed some of the information that came from the interviews of friends, family, etc., I would not be surprised at all to find out that this dude had some animosity towards police. That he had a bone to pick, I guess you could say, with police. Would not be surprised at all. Would not be surprised at all if he regularly posted on social media anti-police kind of stuff, talking about police being revenue generators and calling people bootlickers if they support the police. Would not be surprised at all if that information would be accurate for that person. But they don't offer us any information, and I'm not going to dig too far into this person because they just don't matter to me a whole lot. So, not much else to say about this particular incident. So we'll go on into the next incident.
Get off it. Get off it.
Zero 32. We got this guy illegally on the scooter. He's now going northbound.
You're gonna get fucked up, man. You better stop. You're gonna get fucked up. Where'd you go?
Back down, back down. We are. He's not going. He's coming. Okay.
District 2 Zebra 32, go chase eastbound MLK from Cherry, Carson 2.
The fuck out of the way!
Yeah, now he's running northbound.
You go that way. Drop it, motherfucker! I'm gonna shoot you! Drop it! Drop it! Drop it! Fuck it! Get off that! 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 Let me kill you, motherfucker! I'm shot. I'm shot. I'm shot. I'm shot. 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 I'm gonna shoot you if you don't fucking stop!
Stop fucking moving! Stop fucking moving! I got this arm. I got this arm. I got this arm. You're hitting me, bro!
I'm gonna fucking kill you, I swear to God!
Control that arm.
I'll fucking shoot you!
Control that arm.
Do you understand? I will fucking blow your head off. Do not move.
You ready?
Do not move.
I think it went through my bed. I'm bleeding all over.
I will blow your head off. Do not move.
Shots fired in the area. Call was Boulevard. A shot. Same.
So, thank you.
5, 4.
Thanks, Chief. The next incident occurred the same day, excuse me, about 7:28 p.m. On Wednesday, June 7, 2023, just before 7:30, Denver police officers received a shot spotter alert indicating 7 gunshots had been fired in the area of Martin Luther King Boulevard and Dexter Street. Shortly after that call, or that notification, a call was received by the communications center from a caller who reported hearing shots fired in the area as well. Officers promptly responded to that call and located spent shell casings in the alley as directed by the shot spotter alert. While investigating for damage and injuries from the gunfire, the officers were flagged down by a citizen who advised he observed the individual who was firing a gun. He specifically described that person as a black male wearing red pants who was in the company of a black female. That individual advised the officers that the two were last seen heading towards Martin Luther King Boulevard. Almost a minute after that interaction, officers located a black male wearing red pants riding an electric scooter with a black female near MLK and Elm. The two exactly matched the description that was provided to the officers, and the two that were contacted were in the immediate vicinity of the ShotSpotter incident. The uniformed officers in marked police vehicles drove towards the individual with their emergency lights flashing on their vehicle. The officers exited their vehicle and ordered the male off the scooter that he was riding. The male disregarded the officers' commands and began fleeing on the scooter. Officers followed in their vehicle and pulled alongside the male near the baseball field on Elm Street, again directing him to stop. The male went behind the officer's vehicle and began going eastbound on Martin Luther King Boulevard away from the officers. He then cut between two multifamily housing buildings and ran towards the east-west alley between Martin Luther King Boulevard and Thoreau Place. The officers parked their vehicle at the end of the alley near Forest Street and ran towards the suspect. Upon seeing the officers, the male turned around and began running from the officers. The pursuing officer, who previously had not drawn his firearm, recognized the male was holding a handgun in his right hand. The officer then drew his firearm and ordered the male to drop the weapon he was holding. The male began running southbound between the houses with the officers chasing behind. And as he was running, the male turned towards the officer, took the gun from a one-handed right-handed grip to a two-handed pistol-style grip, and discharged the firearm at the uniformed officer, striking him once. The officer immediately returned fire, striking the suspect multiple times. Officers quickly took the suspect into custody, and he was transported by ambulance to the hospital for treatment. The officer was transported to the hospital by other officers who were on scene. The suspect has since been released from the hospital and is in the custody of the Gilliam Youth Center. Through the investigation, it was determined that the male suspect fired his handgun at least one time at the uniformed officer. The ShotSpotter system captured the exchange of gunfire between the officer and the subject, noting 10 rounds were fired at that time. An unload of the officer's firearm indicated he discharged his weapon 8 times. The firearm the suspect possessed was a Taurus 9mm semi-automatic handgun. That firearm had a drum-style magazine which was capable of holding 50 rounds of 9mm ammunition. A shell casing that was recovered from this shooting scene was forensically matched to the shell casings recovered at the original ShotSpotter location near Dexter Street. Because the individual is a juvenile, and until he's filed on or direct filed into district court, I'm not able to identify him. The officer was struck one time by the round that was fired by the suspect, and after close examination, it was determined that the round struck a magazine that was on the officer's duty belt that he was wearing around his waist. It appears that either shrapnel from the magazine or a fragment from the bullet impacted the officer's lower left abdomen side. The officer sustained a significant bruise and pain from that impact. Again, we're fortunate the officer didn't sustain further injury, and he's been released from the hospital where he continues to recover. The injured officer who discharged his weapon is a patrol officer assigned to the Patrol Network Investigations Team in District 2. That team assists with narcotics investigations, as well as conducting proactive patrols targeting violent crime hotspots. The officer has worked for the department since 2017 and was involved in one prior police shooting incident in 2019 where he was also shot at. The officer's body camera was activated during the event and captured the interaction with the suspect. And the involved officer will complete the department's reintegration program before returning to his patrol assignment. One last thing before I go into the videos, the department recognizes and wants to acknowledge the strong language that was used by the officers during their interaction with the suspect. And that language, the nature of the commands that were given to the individual, will be examined as part of the administrative review of this case. I'll show you some still shots that we captured from the body-worn camera. This is between the two multifamily buildings. There's a grass pathway. Martin Luther King Boulevard is the street to the back. The officer's coming in from the alley. This shows the black male offender wearing red pants as described. He was previously moving away from the officer. He turns his body. He's got the firearm in the two-handed pistol grip, and he discharges a round at the officer. And again, another photo of the officer of the offender pointing the firearm directly at the officer. And you can see how close they are at that point. This is the firearm the individual possessed. Again, a Taurus 9mm firearm with a 50-round drum magazine. There's a better photo of the magazine. And as I described, the magazine that the officer was carrying in his duty belt was impacted, and just shows the impact onto the metal magazine the officer was carrying. Any questions I can answer?
Did the drum have, was it loaded with 50 rounds?
When we recovered it, it was not loaded. There was no more ammunition in the drum.
Determine how many shots he fired in the spot?
So ShotSpotter captured 7 rounds. We recovered 6 shell casings.
The ShotSpotter is audio only, or is there video with the ShotSpotter?
It's only audio, correct.
How old is the juvenile?
17 years old.
Is there anything about his background you can share?
No, sir.
Keith, I'll ask you, you mentioned strong words in that video that you hear the officers say. What was your perspective when you watched the video and you heard what they were
certainly not consistent with our well-communicated department values, and certainly that's something that we will address, but I think right now our focus is on his recovery and his healthy reintegration.
Potentially face discipline for that?
Certainly.
Two violent incidents in one day. I mean, are criminals, are they becoming more emboldened? Are we hearing about it more? I mean, you've obviously been in law enforcement a long time. What are we seeing?
Well, certainly in my 34-year career, we've not seen 2 officers injured, 2 officers involved in shootings in just one calendar day. Yes, as I've talked before, there are far too many guns in our community, far too many individuals that feel emboldened to use them during the daylight, in large crowds, even very near where police officers are known to be. So certainly that's a challenge that we need to continue to address.
How do you do that?
Well, we've already, put in place a violence mitigation plan specifically for the lower downtown area. There are also other areas around the city, East Colfax, some other hotspots that we've identified, and we've actually employed some very successful strategies there. Certainly there's more work to do in other areas, and we will continue to review data, continue to come together to discuss current strategies and see if there are ways to alter those strategies in order to get in front of that violence.
This is a strange question, but how common is it to find a gun with that kind of a drum on it?
Well, more common today than it was once before, certainly. Not an everyday occurrence. I mean, certainly, we've recovered over 1,000 illegal guns just so far this year, and a handful of them have had large capacity magazines.
If there was any legislation that you would push for, perhaps to make the street safer, what would that be, Chief?
Well, I think one thing that I would push for is for safe storage and responsible ownership. Excuse me, because we are finding far too many weapons that are, stolen out of vehicles, stolen out of homes because they're not properly secured. There are a number of tragedies that we've traced back to guns that were stolen or guns that were irresponsibly maintained, to include some suicides.
The girl of the woman that was at the juvenile, is she in custody? Can you give us any information on her?
Matt, you want to talk about that?
Yeah, she is not in custody. We don't anticipate she'll face charges. We are still looking to interview her if she'd cooperate.
And the vehicle that the first suspect drove to the backside of the hotel, is that a stolen vehicle?
It was not a stolen vehicle. Yes, ma'am.
One clarification on that. I know we keep asking you about the location, but lives in Colorado. Would you say lives in the metro area? Has a residence in the metro area?
I believe it's in Weld County. I'm just not confident on which city he lives in out there.
Do you know why there were 7 or 6 shots fired before officers got there? Is there any investigation into what happened before officers arrived?
So there was, and we looked into that. We didn't find any defects indicating damage to property. We didn't find any houses that had been shot. We didn't find any injured victims as well. So that investigation, the investigation of that weapon discharge will be kind of bundled into this officer-involved shooting since the casing is forensically matched.
On the language question, some people might look at that video and there was a lot of adrenaline going. I think when you're in that situation and you use that kind of language, some people might find it like, well, if I was in that situation, I might use some of that language too. I mean, it was a bad situation. Isn't it okay for an officer to use language like that if it's such a that situation is taking place?
Certainly. I think there's an understanding that this is a traumatic incident and certainly a life-threatening incident, and so certainly certain actions, certain language is understandable and even acceptable at times.
What sort of penalty can an officer face if an investigation finds that language was unacceptable?
Well, I think first we need to really kind of analyze all of the facts of the case and get a sense of the justification for the language, the intent for the language. before we start talking about penalties. But certainly, again, the thing that we're most concerned about right now is the criminal investigation as well as the recovery of that officer.
In the second incident, was that officer wearing any kind of protective body armor?
He was.
And is it true that officers are not required to wear safety vests? It's optional?
So it is strongly encouraged, and I think that the overwhelming majority of our officers do wear their safety equipment. Is something that we continue to push from the from the first day of the academy, well throughout their careers.
I do have a follow-up question on the Zunai shooting. You said the body camera was not activated. Can you walk me through that a little bit? You said because he was at a directed patrol? Or?
Yeah, so he was just sitting in his vehicle. And there had, so just sitting in your vehicle on a directed patrol does not require you by policy to activate your body-worn camera. Certainly, had there been an interaction, had there been somebody that would come up to the car to make a complaint, to try to file a criminal complaint or something like that, there would have been a need for him to activate his camera to record that conversation, record that interaction. But he had no interaction with anyone as he was there, and so no requirement to activate that body-worn camera. But again, I think it's just a credit to his presence of mind to, after a significant gun battle in which he was struck 3 times, that he still activated his body-worn camera so that everything from 30 seconds prior to that point and beyond gets recorded.
Would it be fair to say he was ambushed? I mean, that's kind of...
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. I mean, there was nothing that indicated that this individual had any intent to do that. He went into the hotel, quickly came out, and immediately began shooting at the officer.
Was there video inside the hotel that recorded the interaction between that suspect and whoever he spoke with inside?
We do have video from inside the hotel. I'm not sure what perspective it gives us. I don't recall specific to the interaction with the clerk. And I don't believe there's audio associated with that.
And will there be a toxicology on the being performed?
Yes, that's part of the autopsy and the post-mortem exam conducted by the medical examiner's office. We expect a toxicology, typically 8 to 10 weeks.
In the Zunai street shooting, were the weapons registered to the suspect?
So we are waiting on firearms traces on both those firearms to determine ownership.
Was it pretty well documented that this was a migrant shelter? Was it out there? Would the public have access to that and know about it?
I don't know. I don't have the answer to that question. Obviously, the city administration has activated that location and others as safety emergency shelters for the migrants that are coming into our city. Again, other than just the being able to find safe shelter for folks, there's not been a significant safety challenge.
And Chief, do you know if there were any threats made to that quality inn because of them serving the migrant population?
No.
No threats.
Do you know where the juvenile got the Taurus from? Was there ownership established on that weapon?
Again, we're waiting on firearms traces on that, but I'm not clear at this point of how he came into possession of that firearm.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so they were in the area because Shot Spotter had detected shots being fired in the area. So Shot Spotter is a company that puts up microphones in multiple locations all across the city. And all these microphones are tied in to a computer that has special software on it. And the software is able to differentiate between gunfire and other loud noises. And because these microphones are placed in so many different places across the city, the software is able to triangulate where these sounds are coming from, just like you can triangulate a cell phone. So a cell phone is continuously sending out signals, and it can reach out and hit multiple towers. You get 3 towers involved, you can very precisely triangulate exactly where that cell phone is located. Same with Shot Spotter. Someone takes a gun, shoots it in the air, 3 microphones hear it. The computer is able to compute, which microphone heard it first, which, heard it second, which one heard it third, its intensity and everything, and it's able to take that and give an approximation of where this comes from. More microphones involved, it gets more accurate. So the system can literally narrow down to a section of roadway where shots are being fired from. It's kind of cool, but the problem is usually by the time officers get there, the shooters are gone. They don't hang around and wait for the police. They do their stuff and leave. So oftentimes, police find nothing but casings. Sometimes they actually find victims laying on the ground. And in that sense, I guess you could say it's nice because those victims are able to get help, whereas any other time they may not be getting help because no one in that neighborhood is going to be calling 911, especially if it's a very rough enough neighborhood to where the gunfire is normal and people, mind their business and don't see nothing, so they don't call the police. So in those instances where people are actually laying on the ground bleeding, it actually can save people. So these officers are here investigating this shots fired call. They end up finding some casings, and then boom, they're in the area and they spot the description being given out that had been given out.
Get off it! Get off it!
Unfortunately, they blur a lot of the video because one, the female that is on this scooter thing is not a criminal in this incident, at least not known to be having engaged in any crime that they can tie her to, and because the actual criminal is a juvenile. Unfortunately, pretty much all states have some type of restrictive laws in place that limit what the police can release on juveniles. Some places they cannot release their names or their images. Some places can, like Tennessee releases their mugshots and their names and their charges, which I totally agree with. I believe that should be all across the board. There's no reason why we should be hiding the identity of 17-year-old gangbangers who shoot at people. No good reason to hide their identity. The public has a very good interest in wanting to know who these little criminals are so that they can avoid them. Do we need to know about 10-year-old habitual school skipper? No. We don't need to know the mugshots of the ones who've been picked up for truancy. Don't need to know that. 10-year-old stealing candy bars? Now, probably don't need to see their mugshots or their charges or their names. So that's not really a crime of the century. But 15, 16, 17-year-old gangbangers shooting at people, robbing people, burglarizing homes, stealing cars, getting into high-speed pursuits. Yes, most definitely we need to know what they look like. So props to Tennessee for doing the right thing and posting their mugshots and their faces and their names. Unfortunately, Colorado, being kind of liberal as it is, they apparently believe in protecting these violent criminal offenders. So they won't even release this 17-year-old's photograph or an image of what they look like, or what their name is, which is totally wrong. Anyway, enough of that rant. So they get out, attempt to get them to stop, and of course doesn't comply, right?
032, we got this guy fleeing on a scooter. He's now going northbound. Okay.
You're gonna get fucked up, man. You better.
Back this up.
You're gonna get fucked up, man. You better stop. You're gonna get fucked up.
So, I think that even in the press release, I think one of the media people said something about the language that the officers were using. And I think the chief even said something like it's not holding up to our values or some stupid crap. I really have no problem with officers saying this stuff to people. I see it as a form of de-escalation. If you can scare that person into submission, then great. Now, the downside to using that kind of tactic is when it comes to punch time, you're not legally able to follow through with that. So it's one of those balancing acts, kind of like being on a high wire. You know, you got to be really fine with your balancing of it. It can be an effective tactic to get a person to submit. It's a form of posturing. If you can posture and make that person submit, that's awesome. But if they call you on it, then it becomes very clear that it's just a bluff. So coming straight out the gate saying, I'm going to fuck you up. Yeah, that's almost kind of getting into a don't write a check, don't let your mouth write a check that your ass can't cash kind of thing. Now, was this officer, being legitimate in his threat? He's really going to get out and rough this guy up, or insinuating he's going to rough him up? No, this officer is not going to, be doing illegal things. He was just trying to get this person to stop. He was trying to get him to submit. Obviously, dude wasn't having it, was not scared. Basically said F you and kept on going. Now, all joking aside, this person was reported to have a gun. This is a shots fired call. Pulling up alongside this person, in my opinion, is probably not the greatest idea, especially if you don't have lethal cover out. If he would have pulled up alongside him and had his own gun out, I think I would have been a little bit more comfortable with that. But even then, I don't think it's the greatest idea. Because what if that dude reached into his waistband and then just stuck his arm out towards the driver's side of that vehicle and just started unloading? He could have killed that officer. So pulling up alongside people during shots fired calls, or people highly suspected of having guns on them, I just don't think that the juice is worth the squeeze on that one. I don't recommend doing that.
Where'd you go? Back down. We are.
And it also puts you in a situation like this where your vehicle has to have more maneuvering room to be able to get around. It can't turn on a dime. It can't have a sharp turning radius like a small scooter can. That scooter can stop and turn more sharply than what this large Tahoe, I'm guessing this is, can do.
Two zero producing for chase eastbound Allen Case and Cherry Carson 2.
The fuck out of the way!
Yeah, now he's running northbound.
Yeah, sometimes people don't get out of the way.
You go that way. You go that way.
Almost sounds like you said you go that way. So I think it's possible that these two have split up the suspect and the girl, and I think he might be saying to the partner, you go that way, like go after the girl, and he's going after this guy.
I'm gonna shoot you! Drop it! Drop it! Fuckers! Get off that! 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 Let me kill you, motherfucker!
The other officer is there pretty quick, so I don't know if he went chasing after that girl or not.
Drop it! Drop it, motherfucker! I'm gonna shoot you! Drop it! Drop it! Drop it! Fuckers! Get off that! 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 Let me kill you, motherfucker!
I'm shot. I'm shot. I'm shot. I'm shot. Shot.
Drop it! Drop it!
So he, it looks like, could see that the suspect had a gun. You hear him yelling, drop it. You hear him start yelling that.
Motherfucker! I'm gonna shoot you! Drop it!
Right here, you hear him yelling, drop it.
Drop it, motherfucker! I'm gonna shoot you! Drop it! Drop it! Drop Drop it, motherfucker! I'm gonna shoot you! Drop it! Drop it! Drop
So this is action versus reaction. He saw this guy with a gun. This guy has pulled it out. I would suspect that what's possibly happening, or what had possibly happened, was this guy was running and he may have dropped the gun, because that or he tripped and it was already in his hand. Don't know for sure, but it looked like he was kind of hunched down or was down for a little bit. Back that up again to see that one more time.
Drop it, motherfucker! I'm gonna shoot you! Drop it! Drop it!
So I think it's possible that this dude, while he was running, dropped the gun. And he bent down to pick it up. The minute that he goes to pick up the gun, he becomes a deadly physical threat. At that point, I believe the officer would be justified in using deadly physical force. Even though he has not pointed at him yet, just the mere act of him picking this thing up, I believe, is the moment that deadly force would be justified. And I wish that laws would specifically recognize action versus reaction. So they kind of, in a roundabout, indirect way, sort of do when they mention imminent threat. So if you believe that the threat is imminent, you can use deadly physical force. Which Colorado, if they have in their law talking about if it's imminent, he would be justified. But for double protection, I guess you could say, I wish that laws revolving around use of force would in some way recognize action versus reaction, so that when jurors are instructed to weigh the laws and everything, that is something that they have to look at, and that is something that can be brought up in court, and is something that just can't be ignored. Because I believe it's important for people to understand action versus reaction. Let's say for a moment that you and I are standing face to face, and I have my hands out in front of me, about chest level, holding my hands out, and my palms are facing the ceiling. And you, standing in front of me, stick your hands out at chest level, and place your hands on top of mine so that your palms are facing my palms. My palms are facing towards the ceiling and your palms are facing towards my palms and the floor. And I will tell you that I'm going to remove my hands from under yours and smack the top of your hands before you can pull them away. So I'm going to tell you what I'm going to do, and then I'm going to do it. And because there is a time frame between your eyes recognizing movement, sending that signal to your brain processing it and sending a signal to react down to your hands to make that action happen, I, the majority of the time, can smack your hands before you can remove your hands quickly to prevent me from doing it. We do it enough times in a row, you can get better at it and you can beat me. But for the first few tries, I will most likely, the majority of the time, smack the shit out of your hands before you can do anything about it. And you know it's coming. You know what's going to happen. So with that being said, this guy was able to quickly turn, point the gun at the officer, and start shooting before this officer could really react to that. So that's why I say the minute he picked that damn gun up, it should have been green light. When you wait, and you wait, and you wait, that gives them more time to go through their OODA loop and perform an action that you are then going to have to react to and process through your OODA loop and react to. The minute he picked up that gun, he was an imminent threat. In an indirect way, this officer kind of got himself shot.
Fuckers! Get off that! Get off that! Fuckers! Fuckers!
Now he gets kind of close to this gun again. I really wouldn't have had a problem if he sent a few more rounds into this guy to get him away from that gun.
Get off that! Get off that! I'm gonna kill you, motherfucker! I'm shot! I'm shot! I'm shot! I'm shot! 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 I'm firing you! I'm gonna shoot you if you don't fucking stop!
Stop fucking moving! Stop fucking moving! I got this arm. I got this arm. I got this arm. You're hitting me, bro.
I'm gonna fucking kill you, I swear to God!
Control that arm.
I'll fucking shoot you!
Control that arm. Do you understand? I will fucking blow your head up. Do not move. Do not move.
I think it went too my bad. I'm bleeding all over.
I will blow your head up. Do not move. Fucking move.
If you don't fucking stop! Shot! Shot! I'm firing you!
I'm gonna
I'm gonna shoot you if you don't fucking stop!
Stop fucking moving. Stop fucking moving. I got this arm. I got this arm.
So this guy is obviously actively resisting. They're having to struggle with him physically to get him under control, to put him in the cuffs. At this point, more force can be used against him and should be used against him. I'm not saying lethal force. Tasers, definitely. This officer could have holstered his gun, drew taser, fired close proximity, and do a follow-up drive stun, complete the circuit, and achieve NMI, neuromuscular incapacitation. Due to shots being fired, this officer verbalizing that he's been shot, that creates urgency. These other officers cannot render aid to this injured officer until they get this dude into cuffs. The longer this guy struggles, the longer this guy resists, the longer this injured officer is going without rapid pre-hospital treatment. His resisting arrest is endangering this officer's life. These officers are not able to apply direct pressure to his wound. They are not able to put a bandage on him. The more they struggle with this guy, the more they fuck with him, the longer this officer's bleeding. So by that nature right there, yes, more force definitely needs to be utilized to bring control of this guy, put him in cuffs so he cannot effectively fight and harm them anymore. If that requires utilizing tasers on this guy who's already been shot, then so be it. Utilize tasers on him. If this means using open and closed hand strikes to this dude's face, absolutely do it. If that means putting him in a bilateral carotid restraint, a chokehold, by all means, do it. The quicker this dude can be incapacitated, rendered unable to effectively fight with his hands cuffed behind his back, the quicker they're going to be able to provide pre-hospital trauma care to this injured officer who's been shot.
Y'all hurting me, bro.
Y'all hurting me, bro. I swear, these little miscreant thugs are such fucking pussies. They really are. They want to do some tough guy shit and shoot at police and shoot at people, but the minute you put your hands on them, they cry like little babies. You're hurting me, bro. You're hurting me, bro. Buh, 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 buh. Oh, man. Fucking walking vaginas.
I'm gonna fucking kill you, I swear to God!
Throw that arm.
I'll fucking shoot you!
Throw that arm.
Do you understand? I will fucking blow your head up!
I love the sweet little nothings they're whispering into his
I'm
ear.
bleeding all over.
Also notice that as he is so he initially turned to face the officer, square off with him, and shoot. And now as he's getting hit or shot at, he is starting to turn but still shoot at him. So his back is somewhat exposed to this officer as this officer is returning fire. Let's say that this suspect died and it came out that he had bullet holes in his back. The rabid liberal left and the violent criminal coddlers would eat that up. Oh, they would love to post on social media about how the police shot this poor little didn't do nothing in the back. So when people want to whine and complain about bullet holes being in people's backs, this right here is a good visual representation of how that occurs. And why it is not just plausible but acceptable for officers or anyone really to be shooting other people into their back area. Just because their back is turned to you does not mean that they are no longer a deadly physical threat. Case in point, right here. This guy's partially turned away from the officer and he is still firing bullets at this officer. He is still a deadly physical threat. So if this officer ended up putting all his rounds in this dude's back, no problem with that whatsoever.
I got this arm. I got this arm. Oh, fuck.
I'm shot.
So he had the pistol here with the drum magazine in it. I forgot what they said in the news release. Said something about he only had so many rounds left in that thing. So the officer is actually kind of lucky that this dude basically forgot to reload his gun after doing whatever the hell it was he was doing with that girl. He's probably just being a dude, you know, probably trying to show off with this girl and like, hey, look at my gun, let's go shoot it, and was, you know, shooting it off, trying to impress a girl or something, and the dummy forgot to reload his gun. I guess he thought because he had a 50-round drum in it, you know, that's all he needed. Probably didn't even have a reload. Probably didn't have a spare magazine or nothing like that. And those drum magazines are not exactly easy or quick to load anyway. So he failed at maintaining a fighting posture, so to speak. You should always have a fully loaded gun on you, and you should always have spare magazines on you. So this guy, for sure, lost this gunfight because he was just stupid. Alright. Not much else to say about this video. If you like what you hear and see, go ahead and give me a like and a share. If you have not already, hit the subscribe button and stay tuned for more Monday quarterback videos. Earl Henderson, Primordial Defense. Thank you for watching.